Alright, time for some video games, and today I've got a very interesting physics-based dungeon crawling RPG for you. Now, when I say physics-based, I mean legitly physics-based. It's called Exanima, and it's sort of an experiment leading up to another game in the future, but Exanima is a very nice standalone game by itself. Now, what is Exanima? Well, it's sort of like a top-down, somewhat isometric, 3D physics-based RPG with the physics-based combat system is actually really difficult, but really interesting. And it's all about swinging in real time with real physics, your armor, the weapons and everything, it's all physics-based. So that's very difficult to pull off, but also it's something that I absolutely love after I practiced it for a few hours and actually got the hang of the combat system. So let's get into the game and I'll show you what Exanima is all about. So what's Exanima really like? Well, when you jump into the game, you're going to have two modes. You can start a new game, or you can jump into the arena. Now, before you do either of those, I recommend you jump into the options menu and actually read through all the detailed instructions, because Exanima doesn't play like any other RPG you've ever played, because it's all really physics-based. So for example, if you want to swing your sword, you got to hold down the left mouse button, and you'll do a bit of a swing like that. But if you move your mouse along with holding down the button, you'll actually do big sweeping swings. And this comes into effect especially when you're moving around with WASD. You can hold down a crouch button to duck, and the difficult part is it's all physics-based. So if you want to hurt your opponent, the blade of your sword must come into contact with their body. And this is very difficult because your characters automatically block as long as your mouse cursor is facing where the attack is coming from. And this becomes even more complicated based on your armor you're wearing. So for example, if you are wearing very heavy armor on your left side, but no armor on your right, if someone attacks you from the left side, you're pretty protected. You'll take very little damage. But the weak points in your armor are actually your weak points. So I've encountered enemies which have very heavy armor on top, but nothing on their legs. So ducking and slicing their legs is a legit strategy. So this is very complicated already. But once you are actually in the dungeon in a new game and you're walking through the corridors and all of that, the doors open by physics. You gotta move your mouse over to the door and click and drag the door open. You can actually move objects around. So if you see planks of wood or boxes and stuff like that, you can actually drag the boxes around to block your enemies. So controlling your environment is also completely physics-based and part of legit strategy. So Exanima plays very differently from everything else, which of course makes it very difficult to learn how to play it, because it took me 2 hours of practice before I was even half decent at combat. So spending 2 hours in the arena just learning how everything works before you jump into a new game, then that's probably a very good idea. But you can see something like this becoming very nice in competitive multiplayer. I can just already imagine going up against a number of my friends in this physics-based combat in arenas and dungeons and stuff like that. It seems very exciting. Now, the game still is not 100% complete. It's still being developed, but you can buy into it now and play it now, and it feels pretty complete. They've adjusted a lot of things. You can imagine that the walking animations are all physics-based as well, so they looked a little clunky in the past, but they look okay now. But in general, Exanima is a very exciting development, and it's leading up to more and more complex and interesting things, which we definitely have to keep an eye on. So, is Exanima for you? Well, it's not that big of an investment. It's about 30 ringgit on Steam, and for what it is, it's actually pretty worth it. You're going to get a number of hours, quite a lot of hours actually, in just mastering the combat system. If that's something you're into, mastering new combat systems and exploring and dungeon crawling and stuff like that. Now, the dungeon crawling is permadeath, so if you don't like permadeath games, then maybe it's not for you, but it is very challenging. So if you like a challenge and you like this sort of physics-based combat, then you're gonna love Exanima. And just seeing the game develop over time, it's actually adding in more features and more elements and stuff like that, leading up to a game called Sui Generis, which is scheduled for release sometime next year. Sui Generis is going to be a full-on, complete RPG experience. So this physics-based combat mechanics is something that I'd like to see more in the future, because it's sort of an experiment. It's not the same, and you really do have to strategize how many layers of clothing and armor you're wearing, what side you're wearing the armor on, and all of that. It is very, very interesting, and I absolutely love it. So I do have to recommend you at least go check out Exanima. So before I go, I want to thank our wonderful hosts here, Jibril at SS15 Subang Jaya, right behind Sangkaya. They've got some delicious looking churros and some tasty mocktails, which I do love a few myself.
All right, it's the end of today's episode of Gadget Nation, but don't worry, because we got more online as well to keep you entertained, to keep you hungry for technology news and more. Just look up the Astro Awani website. But what am I doing here amongst my footballing friends? Actually, it's for a special reason. It's to get us ready for next week's episode. Really, really excited about it. So I'm going to leave you with this sign.